Welcome to Slacker Sports Show.
Good evening, sports fans, and welcome back to another podcast episode of Slacker Sports Show, where we discuss anything and everything you want to know about sports. Well, let's welcome into the co-host to the podcast, Mark. How are you doing, Mark?
Doing well. NBA playoffs are still kind of trucking along, and we're getting down to the nitty-gritty on those. NFL season starts up tonight as of we're recording on Thursday, so NFL season starts tonight, and then NCAA football's getting up and going as well. So definitely a lot of different parts of sports getting up and ready to go at this point.
Yeah, and so let's talk about the NCAA football and how what we know, what we don't know. Basically, what we do know is that games have started already, but no real, I guess, significant games or Power 5 conference games have started until this weekend. So Saturday, a few games that are going on are going to be Kansas State versus Arkansas State, Notre Dame versus Duke, Florida State at Georgia Tech, Missouri State at number 5 Oklahoma, number 1 Clemson at Wake Forest, and Coastal Carolina versus Kansas. Mostly trying to keep it either, top 25 or, kind of Kansas related, since you're from Kansas and I'm originally from Kansas. So what out of those matchups, what are you looking forward to? Or are you just straight up looking forward to just some NCAA football?
I'd say I'm just looking forward to football in general, either college or pro. Out of these games, most of them are kind of a mismatch, in my opinion. K-State, as a K-State fan, I know that they always kind of schedule cupcakes at the beginning, just get a nice couple wins in there. Notre Dame and Duke, that's a kind of a Power 5 matchup, but Notre Dame is ranked 10th, Duke's unranked, so just based off of preseason polls, Notre Dame has a big edge there. Florida State, Georgia Tech, that might be probably the most even matchup out of the, 6 here that we have listed. I think Florida State's just kind of been in a state of flux the past couple years with new coaches, new players, things like that. So that could be an even matchup. Oklahoma scheduling a cupcake there with Missouri State. Clemson, it'd be interesting to see them and kind of what they can do as the number 1 team in the nation, how good they are this year, what Trevor Lawrence can do this year. Everybody's excited for that and looking forward to him getting drafted next year. And then Coastal Carolina and KU. I think they did Coastal Carolina beat them last year? I don't remember.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It's as a Kansas fan, you wish you could say, yeah, we schedule cupcakes at the beginning of the season, and we kind of do, but we're kind of cupcakes as well. So I can't say that this is going to be an easy KU win, just because of what we've done in the past. Even in years where we may beat a few teams in the Big 12, we seem to struggle with the first 2 or 3 games, and in this year, most Power 5 conference teams are only playing one, basically non-conference game, and then getting into the conference game. So I wish I could say this was going to be an easy win, but I think it will actually be a pretty close game.
Yeah, and I guess in general, I think a lot of these games probably won't be close, but I'm just interested to see how teams handle the pandemic, are huddles broken up, play calling, sidelines, that sort of thing, stadiums without fans or a limited number of fans. I think a lot of the stuff strategy-wise and then maybe even off the field is going to be about as interesting to me as anything on the field, just because it's kind of like when the NBA started up or when MLB started up. It's all new. It's a kind of a new frontier for college football. So I think I'm interested in that stuff about as much as anything going on the field, I guess.
Yeah, and kind of like what you said, the sports that have started are all professional sports. This is going to be the first college sports that we've seen since the pandemic happened. So it's going to be weird to see how colleges, how conferences, how college players actually handle this as well, because not only have we not seen pro football yet, but we haven't. We've seen last week they played some NCAA games, and I haven't heard anything negative about it yet. So I'm assuming that the pro and NCAA are going to kind of handle it the same way, but we'll have to see that. A few games to mention that are not going to be played this weekend is Baylor and TCU. They have postponed their games. And if I remember right, both the teams they're playing have had coronavirus tests in the past, and they haven't got enough practices in and stuff like that to be eligible to play. So I believe those are getting pushed back and played at a later date. I don't think they're being canceled, but we'll have to wait and see kind of throughout the season what happens with teams if a team does get coronavirus. Do they forfeit the rest of their games? Or they postpone to later? What do you think? What do you think we can expect out of the NCAA football season as a whole? And do you think at the end we're going to be able to crown a champion?
I think you'll see some weird postponing here and there, but I think once teams get into things and kind of get used to the protocol, and I mean they've had this practice time early on to get used to it, I think things will run smoothly, especially if there's kind of a limited number of fans and staff and things like that. As far as a champion, the more I thought, at first I was kind of doubting and maybe thought, oh, they may have to go off of rankings or something weird. But the more I'm thinking about it, I think that a football playoff could be possible if they did like a bubble situation. If they had, I think it seems like the national championship of football is usually in Texas or somewhere in the South. If they had a bubble in that city and could handle the 4 teams in the college football playoff, I think you could probably honestly get it done as long as you can kind of police, or maybe police is too strong of a word, but watch where the players are going, make sure they're not breaking kind of quarantine rules, things like that. I think you could have a national championship in football. Maybe a weird kind of unorthodox road to get there with some postponed games. Maybe conference championships are handled differently. I don't know, but I think we'll get to a national championship in football just because, A, I think it's possible with a bubble, and B, there's just so much money involved that I think people are going to make it happen one way or the other.
Yeah, and you also have to think that not all Power 5 conferences are playing. You got some teams that could be national championship contenders, and do they get the shot to be one? Do they, if they decide not to play the season, or if they decide to play later, how are they going to be handled then? I've seen a few things on kind of off topic in the NCAA for basketball. There's some people wanting a 364 team playoff, and it's kind of like, I mean, okay, how is that going to be? How are you going to do that? And so, I mean, do they expand the playoffs here? Do they do maybe the top 16 teams and play it out that way? I don't know. I mean, I think they're going to change. I think stuff will change from the beginning to the end of the season. I think once we get to the end of the season, there will be, I wouldn't say rules changed, but there will be changes that will have happened to either how we do the playoffs or how teams can play and can't play, or, you know, we've seen a couple conferences want to push back to the spring. Do we take certain amount of teams now and then the teams in spring and then add them together and have a spring or summer championship? I don't know how it's going to be done. I don't really see that happening because if you think about it, you think of the Trevor Lawrences that will basically be on an NFL team by then, by the time they do like a late spring or early summer championship. A lot of the seniors will be gone, and I don't know. It's just hard to see, but again, just a weird year, and I'm sure that something will come of that. Something that is going is the NBA playoffs. We've seen a couple of big I wouldn't say underdogs at this point. I mean, they're not like 7-2 seeds or 8-1 seeds, but we've seen some decent play as we've gone through. I think the last time we discussed, we were still in the second, where we started the second round, right? And we were at the end of, there's one more team to play in the first round. And so we're in the second round, and there's a couple of really big matchups, and there was a big, a underdog, I guess, by seeding, upsetting a 1 seed. So let's get it started in the West, Mark.
First matchup we'll go over is the Lakers and the Houston Rockets. Currently, the Lakers are ahead 2-1. They do play tonight, Thursday, in about 40 minutes. I guess it's 6 p.m. Central. Just kind of an overview of what I've seen so far. I think I hit on this in the last podcast, but when you rely so much on like 3-pointers and that style of play that the Rockets do, if you're off at all, you can really have a terrible game and lose by quite a bit, or just not even have a chance of winning because you rely so much on one thing, and that really concerns me for them. An example of that is in Game 1, they were hitting their shots, they were hitting threes, stuff like that, and they won by 15. But the last 2 games, they've lost by 8 points and then 10 points. So when you're relying that much on one part of the game and one part of your offense, if it's off, then the whole thing can go off the rails for you. On the Lakers side, LeBron's starting to turn it on, and I'm a huge LeBron fan. I'll be open and upfront about it. And as he's gotten older, he's been playing with better people, I guess, better surrounding cast, and I think that helps to take the load off on him some, and then kind of just picking and choosing when he exerts more effort. And the playoffs is kind of when he's been turning it on more, maybe taking days off or taking plays off at least during the regular season early on in the playoffs. But right about now is the time he usually turns it on, and we're starting to see that. He had a game the other day with, I think, about 5 blocks, and he's just starting to get more well-rounded and into things. So that's kind of what I see with the Lakers in Houston. Do you have anything to add on that front?
Yeah, and we did cover it last week about Houston just trying to shoot threes to win games and how that can, either be it or burn you. Well, Houston could get away with it in their first round because I believe I thought they were the better opponent in the first round and who they played. So even if a night where they didn't shoot very well, they could still possibly get a win. But now that they're against the Lakers, if they don't shoot well, there's no way they're going to get a win because the Lakers are the better team all around as a team. Now, again, this is kind of proven that the Rockets can do it. They won by 15 the first game, and so they could do it. It's just whether or not they're going to show up and make their shots. And kind of like what you were saying, LeBron's starting to – and I don't watch a lot of LeBron, so I don't really – I see mostly highlights with him. But, I mean, you can kind of tell that the last couple of games he's really been kind of the focal point of it, whereas before I felt like he would play really great in one game, and then the next game it was kind of like he was just chilling, and if they were up, he wouldn't really – he'd be like, we're up, we're fine, send it through Davis or something like that. So I have noticed he's gotten a lot more – into the games lately than he was in the first round. The Lakers up 2-1. I don't see the Lakers. Maybe the Lakers give up another game to Houston. Houston comes out, shoots really hot, wins another one. But I don't think Lakers have anything to worry about here. What do you think?
No, I think they've kind of started turning it on, and Davis had it, like you said, going early on in the playoffs, so he's kind of on a roll. LeBron's starting to get on a roll. I know Rajon Rondo, who's been kind of contributing next to nothing in most of the playoffs, is starting to turn it on and gave him some points the other night. So seems like the Lakers' whole team is starting to really push and get going. So I think the Lakers could end it tonight or maybe at least in 6 games, but I don't think they'll have any problem beating Houston.
All right, and then next team across the street, I don't really even know if they're really across the street. Don't they play in the same place?
Both play in the Staples Center, so same building.
See. So same building. Clippers have a 3-1 lead on Denver. Not really surprised for me just because I feel like Clippers are, again, just the better opponent. But, what do you see from this matchup? Right now they're up 3-1.
Kawhi is starting to take over, and, people might have seen his middle finger block where he basically just got one finger on the ball and somehow blocked it the other night, but he's starting to turn it on offensively and defensively. I think he had 30-some points in their last game when they matched up with Denver. Paul George has done better this series, but he's kind of struggled overall in the bubble, and really this whole season, he's kind of had an on-off switch, and that seems to kind of dictate how the rest of the team besides Kawhi Leonard goes. If Paul George is kind of slacking off or not giving his best effort and maybe not scoring as much as he should, it seems like the rest of the team kind of feeds off that. So that kind of concerns me. You really need a guy of Paul George's caliber to be on all the time, especially in the playoffs, to make a run. And eventually, if they match up with the Lakers, they're going to need Paul George to beat the Lakers. You really need him to be on all the time, and he just hasn't done that this season. So maybe they need a team meeting or just a talk with him and Kawhi, but I think he really needs to make sure he's focused for the rest of this playoff run. And they could end it in Game 5, which would be tomorrow, Friday. We'll see. I was hoping this would be a better series. I thought Denver's a good team, and maybe they just need to add somebody next year to get a good playoff run. But I thought this would be a 6 or 7 game series, but it looks like Clippers could end it in 5 or 6.
All right, so let's move on to the East, where the upset of the tournament or upset of the playoffs so far, and that is Miami beating Milwaukee 4-1 in 5 games. I'm just really surprised by this. Not really like the fact that Miami beat Milwaukee, the fact that they did it in 5 games. The fact that they 4-1 them was kind of the most surprising thing for me, because I felt like Milwaukee coming into it was the number 1 out of the East, but I also didn't really think the East was super strong, and I felt like Milwaukee was kind of dropping games of late, and that they might not have been in the same kind of groove as they were in the regular season before COVID hit. But yeah, Miami just taking it to them, winning the series 4-1. Let's have Mark talk a little bit more about it.
Yeah, I mean, this was a surprise for me, like you said. I mean, I've known Miami's been a good team all season, so I didn't doubt their talent or anything. But like you said, I think it's just surprising that it was only 5 games. And I guess you're just seeing that the well-rounded team is coming out ahead on this one. I think Milwaukee's got a good team, but they're going to have to find somebody that goes alongside Giannis. That's another scorer. He's going to be a free agent after next season, and if they can get another star, that might convince him to stay after that. I think so far he's indicated that he wants to come back after next year. But if they can get another star to be there with him long term and give him kind of a sidekick, that may be something that could both give them an extra edge in the playoffs and make him stay around for years coming up. And then some people think that they may need a new coach. Mike Budenholzer is their coach now, and he's pretty well respected around the league. But one aspect of his coaching that I heard criticized in this playoffs is that he's pretty stuck in his ways about how many minutes he plays people. You think if you had Giannis and you were down 3-0 or 3-1, you'd be playing him more and playing more minutes, and Budenholzer's kind of just stuck in the amount of minutes he wants to give people. And I know Giannis hurt his ankle in Game 4, I believe, and didn't play Game 5, which stinks because you're in an elimination game, you don't have your best guy. But I think they just may need some tweaking about how many minutes everybody's playing. If they can get another star somehow, that'd be great. But we'll see what they do in the offseason going forward. And then Miami, like I've said in a couple other podcasts, they're just a really well-rounded team. I mean, I know Jimmy Butler is their leader and usually top point scorer there, but they got young guys like Tyler Hero, Duncan Robinson, Bam Adebayo, all contributing points. And I think in the East especially, you're seeing just these well-rounded teams really put up a fight, and everybody's kind of eating on these teams. So Miami's definitely falling into that category.
Giannis, it's hard to see. I don't know if Milwaukee has the salary cap, first of all, to be able to end up offering Giannis this huge contract that he's deserved while still trying to get another player that would help them. Those players are out there, but usually those players are still wanting paid. So it might be tough to see who they can get, but I do know that NBA players talk, and I do know that they kind of, I wouldn't say recruit, but they do talk to other players and say, hey, I'm really liking what they're doing in Milwaukee. I really think you should come over and join this team when you have free agent. Keep that in mind. And then some things happen and those players end up showing up. So I could see, Milwaukee's got to do something. Giannis just can't do it all himself, and he doesn't have enough decent, it's hard to say decent. He doesn't have enough good players around him. He has enough players around him that are good enough to play in the NBA, but he doesn't have enough good, well-rounded players around him, kind of like Miami. Like if Miami had a star on their team, like a full star like Giannis, think of how much better they would be. And that's what I think we're seeing here is that a player like Giannis, he's good, but he has to have at least decent, good players around him to be that good as a whole team. You can't just put a great player on a team that isn't very good and expect them to win everything. I mean, you look at, even LeBron's teams. Yeah, LeBron's the best player on his team, 2 or 3 years ago when it was just LeBron. But the cast he had around him was good enough to help him out and keep him in games and stuff. So, yeah, something's got to change in Milwaukee. I feel like the playoffs just haven't been kind to them, and I think a lot of it is that Giannis just can't carry the whole load by himself. And, I mean, I don't think you can expect many of the stars to do that without some sort of cast around him. So, yeah, something's got to change in Milwaukee. But Miami looking good, and I don't know if the extra time off helped Miami or if it's kind of hurting teams. I mean, you saw Houston come in game 1 and tear it up right after they got done with their series. So they had no time off. Lakers did. They ended up winning by 15. But then you look at this, and Miami got I don't even know how many days they got off, almost a week, right? And they come in and they beat Milwaukee 4-1. So you've seen kind of both sides of whether or not the extra time off is working for them. But Miami winning 4-1 against Milwaukee, so they're going to have a few days off before they have to play the winner of Boston and Toronto. Right now they're tied 3-3. Game 7 is on Friday, and both of these teams, I would say, are very well-rounded, and it's kind of why you're seeing it going 3-3 series tie.
Yeah, and I don't really have a good read on who I think is going to win Game 7. It just seems like gone back and forth the whole series, and like you said, both teams are deep. They got a lot of guys that could score at any point in time. I guess the thing that may tip my hand is that when Boston's been really on with their defense, they seem like they've had a little bit easier time distancing themselves from Toronto. I mean, I wouldn't say blowing them out, but they've had a couple games in this series where they're really on defensively, getting turnovers, making Toronto's shooting percentages go down. And I think if Boston can come with that defensive edge in Game 7, I think they can win. But I wouldn't be surprised at all if Toronto did. What are you thinking? I mean, we both thought these were two solid teams coming in. And what was your kind of feel of this series so far?
Well, my feel is, do they play defense in the NBA? Sometimes it's hard to see them play some defense in the NBA, and it's funny because when you watch it, you're like, wow, no one plays defense, all they do is shoot. But what you have to realize is they really do play defense, some players more than other, but teams really do play defense. It's just players are so good at shooting that they make all of these amazing shots look easy. So, I mean, but you're seeing it here. A team that is more defensively sound than another is having more additional opportunities to score, whether it's fast breaks or just more pure just opportunities with shots going up. You're seeing it here, and it's kind of like what they teach you in Pee Wee League. If you play good defense, you're going to win games. And Boston, I think, has been the better defensive team in this. And as you said, if they can play really good defense, then I think they're going to take this one away from Toronto. Toronto, again, the 2 seed, Boston, the 3 seed, so coming in very close together to begin with. But Game 7 is on Friday, and we'll figure that out, who's going to end up playing Miami. So we got in the playoffs still the Lakers and Houston. Game 4 is tonight, and then Clippers and Denver. Game 5 is on Friday, and that is in the West. And then in the East, Miami won. And then Boston and Toronto, Game 7 on Friday to determine that one.
And we'll move on to the NFL. Kickoff is tonight with the Kansas City Chiefs, world champions, and the Houston Texans playing tonight to open the season. We're both excited about that as Kansas City Chiefs fans. Do you have anything you're looking forward to tonight, or we are wanting to see out of either team tonight?
Kind of what you said about football in general. I'm just ready to get football going. And we did a fantasy draft, which is going to be up on our YouTube channel, if not already, very soon. And I'm just excited for normalcy, maybe. I don't know. I walk outside, and right now I'm living in Indiana, and it is currently like 58 degrees out, and it's just amazing fall weather. And you kind of get that feeling when you go outside that, it's fall time. It's ready for fall, which means, kind of cooler evenings and football and that type of stuff. So I'm glad they're bringing football back, and I think the Chiefs in Houston is like almost the perfect situation. I think the only thing that could really be better would be like the Chiefs and the 49ers, or the Chiefs and Baltimore, or something like that. But Houston is one of those teams that's right up there with the Chiefs, and I think it's going to be a fun game. If you don't remember the playoff game last year, the Houston Texans, I think it was 28-0 or 21-0. Houston had the Chiefs in the first quarter, and then Patrick Mahomes comes back the second quarter and ties it up at halftime, and the rest is history. I think the score ended up being like 51-28 or 51-something. And so it was a crazy game and just a lot of offensive firepower. So I think that's a perfect game to get us started off on Thursday. But this weekend, some bigger games coming in Sunday as well. Do you want to go over some of the games on Sunday, Mark?
Yeah, I'll hit on a couple of these. Some we are both interested in are Seattle and Atlanta. Obviously, Seattle's been good for a long time. Atlanta kind of struggled last year, but got Todd Gurley. It'll be interesting to see what he can be for their offense if he's healthy and ready to go. Seattle added Jamal Adams on their defense, so new players on both sides. Green Bay and Minnesota, I guess I'm interested to see kind of where both these teams are in our NFL or our NFC North division preview podcast. I think we both kind of said these teams have the chance to be good, but we kind of have more to see from both of them, so be kind of a good spot to gauge them. Tampa Bay and New Orleans, again, two kind of front runners in their division. Tampa Bay with Tom Brady now and Leonard Fournette. I think that was a development since our last podcast. But they got Leonard Fournette at running back. New Orleans, obviously been good for a long time. So two very skilled teams, Dallas and Los Angeles. The Rams, forget there's two teams in Los Angeles now. Dallas and Los Angeles. Dallas, a lot of people are high on them. A lot of their new pieces, CeeDee Lamb, new coach in Mike McCarthy. People will be interested to see kind of where they're at as a team. Same thing with the Rams. A little bit disappointing last year, and just be watching for what they can do this year. Tennessee and Denver. Tennessee obviously made the AFC Championship last year against the Chiefs. How will they be this year? Will they need to rely more on their passing game? Will it still be the Derrick Henry show? We're not sure. Denver, some up-and-coming players on there. And then one I'm particularly interested in is Arizona and San Francisco. On one side, I'm interested in that because San Francisco was in the Super Bowl last year with the Chiefs, and can they be a good team again, or do they kind of have that Super Bowl hangover that a lot of the teams that lose the Super Bowl have? And then on Arizona's side, they got DeAndre Hopkins now, who just agreed to a contract extension earlier this week. I want to see how he gets involved in the offense. I want to see how Kyler Murray does. Debated getting him in our fantasy draft and ultimately didn't, but be kind of interesting to see what he does in his second year. And kind of just a lot of their new pieces in Arizona. I want to see where they're at as far as a kind of a new look team. What are you thinking with some of these games?
I'm thinking that we are going to figure out a lot of these teams in week one, honestly, because I feel like they even though we didn't have preseason, I feel like a lot of preseason is getting kind of acclimated to the game, taking snaps, stuff like that. And yeah, in practice it's not like they don't snap it to each other in practice, but we've seen no preseason games. So I'm interested to see if teams are struggling with play calling, if there's offsides, if there's false starts, if there's, a player doesn't run a route right, stuff like that. If there's fumble issues on handoffs, I don't know. Usually in those 4 preseason games, they usually kind of, they figure out who they want to be on their depth chart and who they want to make the roster. But the other thing is getting them just game snaps, getting your first team game snaps where it's finally important and, you got to make things happen. So I think a lot will happen this weekend. I think the teams that have more veteran players, more veteran quarterbacks will be better off than teams that kind of have the younger quarterbacks or younger players in general. That's just because they've had the game experience. They've had years of it. So I don't think they necessarily need preseason, so to speak. But, you've seen it in preseason where these great teams, like even the Chiefs, come in preseason and they can't figure it out. It's like they just can't make a drive go. And it's just all because they haven't gelled together. You got running backs and wide receivers running routes that the quarterback doesn't understand, like stuff like that. So I think the first week's going to be a lot of learning, especially for teams that decide to use younger players, younger running backs, younger wide receivers, younger quarterbacks. But I think that the better teams will probably, and more veteran teams will come out on top. So when you're looking at these games, kind of keep that in mind. Tampa Bay seems like they're going to be unstoppable, but they're going against a team in New Orleans that's been great for years. They've played for years. So you got, Mike Thomas, Drew Brees, Kamara, all of them played for years together, so I don't think they're going to have a lot of time gelling. But now you got Tom Brady with all of his wide receivers in Tampa Bay, and then you got Gronk kind of coming in late in the season. So, a team like Tampa Bay might end up being one of the best in the end, but at the beginning of the season, I see a team like that kind of really struggling. Another good one I'm kind of looking forward to is the Green Bay and Minnesota game. I feel like this might kind of set a tone for what these teams will finish in their division. I read something today about Aaron Rodgers actually feeling really, really good about this year. Last year, he struggled because he felt like he was never really on the same page as his head coach and offensive coordinator. And he kind of, in the interview, he said he's really excited because of all these Zoom meetings that they've done, and he feels like they're kind of on the same page, and he's really excited for this year. So, I mean, you think of Aaron Rodgers, and he's one of the best quarterbacks yet. Last year, he kind of struggled, and Green Bay still had a good year. I mean, they still had a good year, but I think they're going to be better this year, so I'm kind of excited to see them play Minnesota and see if the Green Bay of old is kind of back, where Green Bay is kind of one of those teams that is definitely going to be in the playoffs and going to be a hard playoff out.
I think that'll about wrap it up for us. We thank everybody for listening. We appreciate you guys, and if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you subscribe wherever you're listening to your podcast, whether that's on YouTube. We have the videos up there of each podcast, or Apple or Spotify, wherever you're listening. Make sure you subscribe. If you could share, we put links out on Facebook and Twitter and stuff. If you could share those links, that'd be great. Like I said, we started up a YouTube channel, and like Trevor mentioned earlier, our fantasy draft and kind of commentary during that will be up there soon. You can find that YouTube channel at Slackers Sports Show. And you can also follow us, like I said, on our Twitter page to get updates on us, links to the podcast, different stories we find interesting by searching at Slackers Sports.
And the AFC East will be the last division where we talk about the NFL, since the NFL season is starting. And I will do my best to have it up Sunday, but look forward to the AFC East that has the Patriots, the Bills, the Jets, and the Dolphins.